The title changed everything, but nothing at all. On July 30th, 1981, Diana Spencer woke up as Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales. 24 hours earlier, she had been Lady Diana, a nervous bride walking down an impossibly long aisle. Now she was a princess, third-ranking woman in the British monarchy, destined to be queen consort. The world believed her fairy tale had come true. Diana was learning it had all been a carefully constructed lie. Now you will hear a dramatized reflection, inspired by the emotions, relationships, and public struggles behind this chapter of royal history. The morning after the wedding night at Broadlands, Diana woke alone. Charles had already risen, dressed, and left their bedroom without waking her. It was her first lesson in royal marriage. Personal connection was secondary to schedule, intimacy less important than duty. She found him at breakfast, reading newspapers filled with glowing coverage of their wedding. 750 million people had watched. The photographs were spectacular. The public was enchanted. Charles seemed pleased with the coverage, but not with her. When Diana tried to discuss the previous night's awkwardness, hoping to bridge the emotional distance she felt widening between them, Charles dismissed her concerns. They had a schedule to keep. The Mediterranean cruise aboard the royal yacht Britannia awaited. Personal feelings could wait, or rather, they could be ignored indefinitely. Diana was beginning to understand the first lie she had been told, that marriage would create partnership. The vows spoken in St. Paul's Cathedral hadn't changed Charles's fundamental nature or his feelings about their arrangement. She was his wife legally, dynastically, publicly, but she was not his partner emotionally, and she never would be. Imagine the confusion crushing Diana during those first hours as a princess. She had achieved what millions of girls dreamed about: marrying a prince, becoming royalty, securing a position of unimaginable privilege and influence. Yet she felt more trapped than she had ever felt in her life. The title that should have empowered her actually stripped away what little autonomy she'd possessed. As Lady Diana Spencer, she could theoretically walk away, make different choices, control some aspect of her future. As Princess of Wales, she belonged to the institution. Her body, her time, her image, her very identity were no longer her own. But no one knew the real consequence of that transformation, or what Diana would discover about the price of her new title. The journey to Gibraltar was surreal. Crowds lined the streets, cheering wildly for the newlyweds. Diana waved mechanically, performing the role she was expected to play. Charles waved beside her, equally mechanical. They were already becoming the carefully choreographed public performance that would define their marriage: intimacy for cameras, distance in private. The disconnect was jarring. Diana could see it happening, but felt powerless to stop it. Aboard the Britannia, the lie deepened. The yacht was magnificent, a floating palace with every luxury imaginable: crystal chandeliers, gourmet meals prepared by palace chefs, a full crew attending to their every need. They visited exotic Mediterranean ports that should have been romantic: Tunisia's ancient ruins, Sicily's dramatic coastline, Greece's island paradises. Each stop was carefully planned for maximum visual impact in the photographs that would be distributed to hungry media worldwide. But behind the staged photo opportunities, Diana was learning the second lie, that royal privilege meant freedom. In reality, every moment was controlled, monitored, orchestrated. She couldn't leave the yacht without security clearance. She couldn't make phone calls without them being logged. She couldn't speak honestly to anyone without it being reported back to senior palace officials. The gilded cage was more restrictive than any prison precisely because it was so beautiful. How could she complain about being trapped when her prison was a luxury yacht sailing the Mediterranean? What happened next? showed Diana just how completely the lie had consumed her life. Charles's daily routine aboard the Britannia revealed the third lie, that becoming his wife would make her important to him. Each morning, Charles rose early and spent hours alone, reading, painting watercolors, writing in his journal. He had no interest in sharing these activities with Diana or including her in his private world. When she tried to join him, suggesting they paint together or simply talk, he made it clear her presence was intrusive rather than welcome. Meals together were formal, constrained by the presence of yacht officers and staff. Private moments were brief and increasingly uncomfortable. Charles seemed happiest when Diana wasn't demanding his attention or emotional engagement. The more she tried to create intimacy, the more he withdrew. It was a dynamic that would define their entire marriage, her desperate need for connection pushing him further into self-protective isolation. Diana tried to adapt, tried to be what she thought he wanted. She dressed carefully, choosing outfits she hoped would please him. She tried to be interested in his hobbies, asking questions about his paintings and his books. She attempted to be the perfect companion, agreeable, attractive, undemanding, but nothing worked. Charles wasn't looking for a companion. He already had one, and her name was Camilla. The photographs of Camilla that Diana had discovered while packing were just the beginning. As the honeymoon progressed, Diana found more evidence of Camilla's continued presence in Charles's life and heart. A book Camilla had given him, inscribed with private jokes, cufflinks she'd gifted him that he wore constantly. References in his journal that Diana glimpsed accidentally, making clear his thoughts remained with another woman. But no one knew the real consequence of these discoveries, or how they were systematically destroying Diana's sense of reality. When Diana confronted Charles about the continued Camilla presence, his response taught her the fourth lie, that honesty was valued in royal marriage. Charles was furious that she had looked at his private belongings, read his journal, questioned his friendships. Her feelings of betrayal were irrelevant compared to her breach of his privacy. The message was clear. She was not permitted to have needs, express hurt, or demand fidelity. Those were unreasonable expectations that violated royal protocol. The institution's rules were explicit, though never written down. The heir to the throne could maintain whatever private arrangements he wanted, as long as public appearances were maintained. Diana's job was to produce heirs and look appropriate at public events. Her emotional needs were her problem to manage, not his responsibility to address. Diana's eating disorder intensified dramatically during the cruise. The bulimia that had started during the engagement became her only source of control in an increasingly uncontrollable life. When she couldn't control Charles's feelings, couldn't control her schedule, couldn't control the constant surveillance, she controlled her food. The binging and purging gave her a sense of agency that was otherwise completely absent. It was destructive, but it was hers. The yacht's crew noticed her barely touching elaborate meals. They reported it to senior staff, who reported it to Charles, who did nothing. Diana's visible distress was treated as attention-seeking rather than genuine mental health crisis. The institution's response to suffering was always the same: suppress it, hide it, pretend it doesn't exist. Acknowledging that the Princess of Wales was having a breakdown would damage the carefully constructed narrative of fairy tale romance. And what happened next would teach Diana the most devastating lie of all. By the time they reached Balmoral for the second part of the honeymoon, Diana had learned the fifth lie, that the royal family would welcome her as one of their own. The Scottish estate, beloved by generations of Windsors, felt hostile from the moment she arrived. The Queen was polite but distant. Prince Philip was openly irritated by her emotional displays. Princess Anne barely acknowledged her existence. The Queen Mother's coldness was legendary. She had never approved of Diana and made no effort to hide it. Diana was expected to adapt instantly to complex hierarchies and unwritten rules that had governed the family for generations. She was supposed to know instinctively where to sit at dinner, how to address various relatives, which topics were acceptable for discussion, and which were forbidden. When she made mistakes, they were noted with disapproving silence rather than gentle correction. She was failing tests she didn't know she was taking. The days at Balmoral revolved around outdoor activities Diana had no interest in and no skill for: shooting, fishing, long walks across harsh terrain in all weather. Charles thrived in this environment, disappearing for hours on solitary pursuits. Diana was left alone in the vast, cold castle, trying to navigate relationships with people who had no interest in making her feel welcome. One afternoon, Diana attempted to explain to the Queen how isolated she felt. Elizabeth listened politely, then offered the advice that had sustained her through her own difficulties: patience, discretion, duty. The implication was clear. Diana's struggles were a failure of character rather than a legitimate response to an impossible situation. If Elizabeth had endured decades of royal life without complaint, Diana should be able to do the same. But Diana couldn't. She was built differently, felt differently, needed differently. The sixth lie she'd been told was that she could become like them if she just tried hard enough. That suppressing emotion was a skill anyone could learn. That duty could substitute for happiness if you simply accepted its supremacy. Diana couldn't accept it. Every day at Balmoral chipped away at her sense of self. She was becoming a ghost, a performance, a carefully managed public image with no private self remaining. The person she had been before the wedding, hopeful, warm, genuinely kind, was disappearing, replaced by someone hollow and desperate. What happened next revealed the final, most crushing lie of all. Diana discovered she was pregnant. The test was positive, just weeks after the wedding. Under normal circumstances, this would be joyous news, a young couple expecting their first child. But these were not normal circumstances. Diana felt trapped rather than blessed. She was permanently, biologically bound to Charles now. There would be no escape, no walking away, no possibility of divorce. The institution had what it wanted from her: an heir in production. Her usefulness was confirmed. Her misery was irrelevant. When Diana told Charles about the pregnancy, his response was telling. He was pleased in the abstract. Duty fulfilled, succession secured. But he showed no emotional connection to Diana herself, no tenderness toward the woman carrying his child, no interest in supporting her through what would obviously be a difficult pregnancy given her eating disorder and deteriorating mental state. The palace machinery immediately took over. Diana's pregnancy became an institutional matter rather than a personal one. Doctors were assigned, schedules were adjusted, public announcements were carefully timed, but no one asked Diana how she felt, what she needed, whether she was okay. She was a vessel for the heir, nothing more. The seventh and final lie Diana learned during those first weeks as a princess was the most devastating: that being chosen meant being valued. Charles had chosen her from dozens of potential candidates. The institution had vetted and approved her. The public had embraced her. She should feel honored, grateful, fulfilled. Instead, she felt utterly worthless. She had been selected for breeding purposes, like livestock. Her youth, virginity, and aristocratic bloodline made her suitable. But Diana herself, her personality, her needs, her humanity, was irrelevant. She could be replaced by any other girl who met the same criteria. There was nothing special about her, except her ability to produce legitimate heirs. This realization, crushing and undeniable, settled over Diana like a suffocating blanket during those first weeks as Princess of Wales. The title she had thought would give her significance had actually stripped it away. She was less important as a princess than she had been as Lady Diana Spencer. At least then, she had belonged to herself. By the time they returned to London in September, preparing for the public duties that would define her new life, Diana had learned every lie the institution had told her. Marriage wouldn't create partnership. Royal privilege wasn't freedom. Becoming Charles's wife hadn't made her important to him. Honesty wasn't valued. The family wouldn't welcome her. She couldn't become like them. Being chosen didn't mean being valued. She was trapped in a role that demanded everything and gave nothing. She was performing happiness while dying inside. She was pregnant with the heir to the throne while battling bulimia and suicidal thoughts that terrified her. She was the most photographed woman in the world while being completely, utterly alone. The lie had been perfect, comprehensive, impossible to escape, and Diana's first night as a princess, waking up alone, reaching for a husband who wasn't there, realizing the fairy tale had been fiction all along, was just the beginning of understanding how completely she had been deceived. The world still believed the fairy tale. The photographs showed a radiant princess living a dream. But Diana knew the truth. She had learned it during that first night as Princess of Wales, and she would spend the next 16 years trying to survive it. Some lies are so complete, so carefully constructed, that by the time you see the truth, it's far too late to escape.